Most people have a completely distorted view of what leadership really looks like. They see the external version, confidence on stage, clean social media posts, team celebrations, and business growth, and they assume that's the whole picture. They think leadership is charisma, or being liked, or having influence. But the reality, leadership is a lot messier, a lot lonelier, and a lot more uncomfortable than most people are willing to admit. And the gap between what people think leadership is and what it actually requires, that gap is where most potential leaders fall short. Leadership isn't about being the smartest or the loudest in the room. It's about taking responsibility when things go sideways and giving credit when things go well. That sounds noble in theory, but in practice, it means swallowing your pride, holding your team to standards they're not used to, and stepping into conflict when it would be easier to avoid it. The real leaders aren't the ones who want the spotlight. They're the ones who stay up at night thinking about how to support their team through the next wave of challenges. They don't just post about culture. They build it brick by brick, decision by decision, conversation by conversation, and that doesn't always look good on Instagram. People want the title, but they don't want the tension that comes with it. Leadership is tension, tension between performance and people, tension between vision and execution, tension between empathy and accountability. If you're doing it right, you are constantly toggling between pushing and pulling, knowing when to stretch someone and when to give them space. That discernment isn't gifted to you when you get promoted. It's developed over time by doing the hard things, over and over again. And here's what no one tells you: real leadership is often invisible. It's the conversation you have with a team member who's underperforming, knowing they might not like you after it. It's the decision to cut a product or a strategy that you personally loved but the numbers don't support. It's the discipline to keep showing up with consistency when no one is clapping for you, when your energy is drained, when you're second guessing your own ability. You don't post about that part, you just do it because it's what the role demands. People misinterpret leadership as control. They think once they're the leader, they get to make all the calls, have all the power, and answer to no one. That couldn't be further from the truth. The higher you go, the more accountability you carry. You don't answer to fewer people, you answer to more. Your team, your board, your customers, your vision. Every decision you make affects someone else, and pretending that it doesn't is the fastest way to lose trust. Leadership is service. It's being the one who takes the hit when something fails, and the one who steps aside when someone else deserves the recognition. And that's hard. That's counter to how we're wired. But if you're doing it right, you're growing people. Not just your bottom line, you're building something that lasts beyond you. That requires humility, and most people aren't taught how to develop that. They're taught how to sell, how to scale, how to market, not how to sit with discomfort, not how to lead when it's unpopular. Let's be clear, leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking better questions. It's about creating clarity when the path is foggy. It's about showing up especially when things get hard, and being a model for how to navigate uncertainty. And no, that's not glamorous, but it's real. And if you're only in it for the version that looks good from the outside, you won't last. So if you're stepping into leadership thinking it's going to feel good all the time, you're in for a wake-up call. It's not supposed to feel good. It's supposed to make you better. And if you're willing to embrace that, to lead from a place of responsibility instead of ego, you'll become the kind of leader people trust, follow, and remember. But first, you have to let go of what you thought it was going to be and show up for what it really is. Success is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the modern world. People see the results, money, influence, recognition, and assume that's success. They watch highlight reels, listen to polished interviews, and scroll through filtered content that shows the after story. But what they rarely see, and what they almost never talk about, is the grind. The unglamorous, repetitive, exhausting work that builds the foundation for those shiny outcomes. The hidden grind behind success is where the real story lives, and most people aren't willing to go there. There is a fantasy that success is a product of inspiration, That if you can just get motivated enough, or find the right mentor, or discover your purpose, everything will click into place. But that's not how it works. Real success is built on systems, routines, discipline, and choices that don't always feel good in the moment. It's not about the big leap. It's about the thousand micro decisions that compound over time, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, and when you're questioning if any of it is even working. The grind is waking up early to do work that won't pay off immediately. It's having the uncomfortable conversation instead of letting things slide. It's holding yourself to a higher standard when it would be easier to coast. It's choosing discipline over dopamine again and again. And it's not something that comes naturally. It's something you choose daily with intention. Most people avoid that kind of commitment because it doesn't offer immediate gratification. But here's the truth. The people who look like they're winning in public have usually lost 100 times in private, and kept going anyway. Nobody talks about how lonely it feels to keep doing the right thing when it's not producing fast results. The hours you put in to improve a skill you're still bad at, the calls you make that get ignored, the events you attend where you feel invisible, that's the part of the journey people skip over because it's uncomfortable to admit that success is boring most days. It's repetitive. It's showing up to do the work long after the motivation fades. That's the grind. And that's the price. The biggest lie people believe is that successful people are built different, that they were born with something special. The truth is, they just made fewer excuses, they showed up more consistently, they said no to more distractions, and they were willing to be underestimated for a long time. That's what separates winners from talkers. Not talent, not luck, just a relentless commitment to doing what matters, even when it's not fun, even when it's not flashy. Success isn't a moment, it's a habit. It's built into the way you live, the way you work, the way you think. And you don't need permission to step into it. You need discipline. You need to stop waiting for it to get easier or more exciting, and start acting like someone who's already committed. That's where the shift happens. Not when you set the goal, but when you decide you're not going to quit on it, no matter how long it takes. You also have to get honest with yourself about what you're willing to sacrifice. Everyone wants growth until they realize what it costs. It costs your time, your comfort, your weekends, your ego. It costs being misunderstood. It costs being the one who always shows up prepared, who always brings the energy, who always holds the line, even when no one else does. That's the hidden grind. It's not just hard work, it's ownership, and that's a choice, not a personality trait. The reason this part is hidden is because it doesn't get likes. It doesn't look good on paper. But it's the part that matters most, because once you understand that the grind is the actual process, not a temporary phase but a lifestyle, you stop chasing shortcuts. You stop comparing yourself to people who haven't done the work. You start building something real, something sustainable, something earned. So if you're tired, if you're doubting, if you're in the middle of it wondering if it's worth it, good, that means you're doing it right. The grind isn't supposed to feel easy, it's supposed to stretch you, it's supposed to test how badly you want it. But if you keep showing up, if you keep aligning your actions with your goals, the success you're after will become inevitable. Not overnight, but over time. You just have to stay in the work. We've been sold a lie, the idea that growth should feel good, that progress should be exciting, and that if something feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. That narrative is everywhere, on social media, in self-help books, in corporate culture. Follow your passion. Do what feels aligned. If it's meant for you, it'll be easy. But let's be clear, growth isn't supposed to feel good all the time. In fact, real, meaningful growth usually feels like frustration, self-doubt, and resistance, and if you're chasing comfort, you're probably avoiding the very things that would actually move you forward. This feel-good narrative is attractive because it gives people a false sense of control. It tells them they're doing enough just by feeling good. It rewards intention over execution, but the reality is, if you only take action when it feels good, you'll never build anything that matters. You'll stay in your comfort zone, rationalize your lack of results, and blame your circumstances instead of owning your choices. That's not leadership. That's avoidance disguised as mindfulness. There is nothing wrong with wanting to enjoy your work. But the idea that discomfort is a sign something is broken, that's where people go wrong. Discomfort is often a sign that you're doing something new, something important, something that stretches who you are. It's not a red flag, it's feedback, and if you're constantly backing away from that feedback, you'll plateau. You'll confuse stillness with peace and stagnation with stability. Growth, by definition, requires change. And change feels awkward, always. Ask anyone who's actually achieved something significant, built a business, scaled a team, led through adversity, and they'll tell you there were days they didn't feel good. Days they wanted to quit, days they questioned if they were even capable, but they kept going, not because it felt good, but because they were committed. They understood that the results weren't tied to their feelings, they were tied to their actions. The discipline to keep showing up, regardless of how it felt, was the difference. This is where leadership becomes very real. Because if you're in charge, you don't have the luxury of acting based on emotion alone. You can't lead a team effectively if your performance is dictated by your mood. The job is to create stability, to provide clarity, to model what it looks like to stay the course when things get hard. That means doing the hard things even when you're tired, having the tough conversations even when you're uncomfortable, making decisions with imperfect information, and not making your discomfort someone else's burden. You can't teach resilience by avoiding tension. You can't coach people through growth by constantly cushioning their experience. The best leaders challenge their people, not because they're harsh, but because they believe in their potential. They know that self-esteem is built through overcoming, not avoiding. When you lower the bar to make someone feel better in the short term, you rob them of the chance to rise to the occasion. That's not empowerment. That's enabling. This is why so many teams underperform, because the culture is built around feeling good, not around doing what's necessary. People get praised for trying instead of delivering. Meetings are filled with soft language instead of clear expectations. And leaders are more concerned with being liked than being effective. That might feel good temporarily, but long-term it creates confusion, resentment, and mediocrity. People don't rise in environments where accountability is optional. True growth often comes with frustration. It comes with failing at something, learning through correction, and doing it better the next time. It's built through the repetition of hard choices, not just when they're new, but when they're boring, when they're inconvenient, when they feel thankless. You don't outgrow that part, you just get better at embracing it, at recognizing that temporary discomfort is the price of long-term growth. So if you're chasing something meaningful and it doesn't feel good right now, don't pull back. Lean in, this is the work. The discomfort you're feeling isn't a reason to stop, it's proof that you're in motion, that you're moving beyond what's familiar, and if you can stay in it, stay consistent, stay clear, stay committed, you'll grow through it. Not just professionally, but personally. You'll become someone who's not reliant on motivation or comfort to keep going. You'll be someone who gets results no matter how it feels. That's real leadership. That's real growth, and it has nothing to do with feeling good. One of the most damaging misconceptions in leadership is the idea that holding someone accountable means you're micromanaging them. Somewhere along the way, we confused support with control and expectations with pressure. Now, leaders are hesitant to follow up, to ask for updates, or to give real feedback because they're afraid of being labeled as controlling. But here's the truth: accountability is not micromanagement. Accountability is clarity, it's alignment, it's a form of leadership that communicates, I care enough about your success to follow through. When there's no accountability, there's no ownership. People operate based on assumptions. Deadlines are flexible, performance is subjective, and standards slowly erode. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens subtly. A missed deliverable gets ignored. A performance issue gets brushed under the rug. A promise to the team goes unfulfilled. One by one, trust starts to dissolve. Not because the leader is too involved, but because they're not involved enough in the things that matter, and in hyper-forming cultures, that's not acceptable. Micromanagement is about control. It's rooted in fear. Fear that if you don't personally oversee every detail, something will go wrong. But accountability is about trust. It's about setting expectations up front, making sure they're understood, and then checking in consistently to measure progress. You don't need to watch every move someone makes. You just need to ensure that what they said they'd do actually gets done. That's not control, that's leadership. People crave structure more than they admit. They want to know where they stand. They want feedback, even if it's uncomfortable, because it shows that someone is paying attention. Being ignored feels worse than being corrected. When a leader holds someone accountable, they're saying, "Your work matters. I see it. I expect results because I know you're capable." That message builds confidence. Avoiding accountability, on the other hand, creates confusion. And confused people don't perform at their best. Let's be honest, leaders often avoid accountability conversations not because they're unnecessary, but because they're uncomfortable. It's easier to let something slide than it is to confront it. It feels more diplomatic to give grace than to call someone out, but real leadership isn't about comfort, it's about effectiveness. If someone on your team is falling short and you don't address it, you're not protecting their feelings, you're sabotaging their growth. You're letting them believe that average is acceptable, and that mindset spreads fast. Accountability is how you scale trust in an organization. When people know that everyone is being held to the same standard, they step up. They stop making excuses, they communicate better, and most importantly, they begin to take ownership, not just of their tasks, but of their results. That shift doesn't happen in a passive culture. It happens when leaders are consistent, direct, and unafraid to challenge their people to rise. You can't have high standards without high accountability. If you're asking for excellence but refusing to check in, you're setting your team up to fail. People don't do what's expected, they do what's inspected. And that's not a cynical view, it's human nature. Even the best performers need touch points. They need feedback loops. They need to know that their leader is paying attention and is invested in their development. That's what accountability looks like at its best. Being an accountable leader doesn't mean you're constantly chasing your team. It means you've created rhythms where progress is reviewed regularly. It means there's no confusion about what success looks like. And it means that when someone doesn't meet the mark, you address it early before it turns into a pattern. That's not micromanagement, that's maturity. And for the people who say, "Well, I don't want to feel like I'm babysitting," the real question is, why are you hiring people who need babysitting? And if you've hired strong people, why aren't you giving them the feedback and direction they need to thrive? Leadership isn't about staying hands off and hoping for the best. It's about being hands on where it matters most. So if you care about your team, if you care about your culture, and if you care about results, you need to embrace accountability, not as a punishment, but as a practice. A tool that aligns action with expectation, a discipline that drives performance, and a mindset that says, "We don't just talk about excellence here, we live it." Because in forming environments, accountability isn't an option, it's the standard. Clarity is often romanticized as a breakthrough moment, something that comes after enough reflection, journaling, or soul searching. People wait for it like it's a divine signal that tells them what to do next. But here's the truth: clarity doesn't just show up. It doesn't come from overthinking, overanalyzing, or sitting on the sidelines waiting for the perfect plan. Clarity comes through action, through doing. Through movement. You don't figure it out and then start. You start and then figure it out. One of the biggest traps people fall into is believing they need to have it all mapped out before they take the first step. They think they need to be sure. They think they need a 10-point plan and a guarantee, but what they really need is momentum, because clarity doesn't live in your head. It lives in your experience. You learn what works by trying. You learn what doesn't by failing. Every step you take gives you more information than a month of thinking ever could. You gain insight by engaging, not by avoiding. You don't get clarity by standing still. You get it by making decisions, testing, executing, assessing what happened. The people who move forward are the ones who are willing to be wrong, willing to iterate, willing to look at their actions honestly and ask, what's the next right step? That question is powerful, not because it's perfect, but because it keeps you moving, and movement is where growth happens. The obsession with finding clarity often masks fear. It's easier to say, I'm still thinking it through, than it is to admit, I'm scared to start. But action doesn't require full confidence, it requires courage. You don't need to know how the entire path unfolds. You just need to trust yourself to take the first step and respond to what happens next. Waiting for perfect clarity is usually just another form of procrastination, and it keeps people stuck, smart people, talented people, capable people, because they've convinced themselves that clarity is a prerequisite when in reality it's a byproduct. When you take action, you build data. You see what energizes you, what drains you, what resonates with your audience, what falls flat. You start to see patterns. You begin to recognize where you're effective and where you're not. That feedback loop is what creates real clarity, not just about what you're doing, but about who you're becoming. You can't get that from theory, you can only get it from experience. This applies to leadership in a big way. Leaders often delay making decisions because they are waiting for more clarity, but their team doesn't need perfect answers. They need direction. They need to see that action is being taken, that momentum is being built. A leader who moves with imperfect clarity will outperform the one who waits for certainty every time. Why? Because people trust progress more than they trust perfection. And trust is built when people see you're willing to step in, even when things are messy. Action builds confidence. The more you do, the more you believe in your ability to handle what comes next. You don't need to eliminate doubt. You need to learn how to move with it. The people who get stuck in their heads are usually the ones trying to outthink fear. But you don't think your way into confidence, you act your way into it. Every action you take tells your brain, I'm capable, I can do hard things, I can figure it out. And that narrative is much more powerful than any mantra or mindset work you do in isolation. It's not that thinking has no place, it's that it can't replace doing. Reflection is useful, planning is necessary, but they only work when they are paired with execution. Otherwise, they become excuses. Clarity is earned through movement, through showing up, doing the work, evaluating what happened, and adjusting accordingly. That process refines your direction far more than any amount of overthinking ever could. So if you're stuck, if you're unclear, if you're waiting for the perfect sign, stop waiting, pick something, move, decide, try, and then pay attention to what you learn. That's how you get clarity, not from staying still, but from stepping forward. Again and again, because clarity isn't a destination, it's a practice, one you build through consistent, courageous action.